Hey, I'm James, 32 years old. My wife, Sophie, is 29. I never thought I'd be telling a story like this, but here we are. A story filled with deception, unexpected revelations, and, of course, the kind of revenge that makes you want to grab some popcorn. But before we get to the grand finale, let's rewind a few weeks. Let me show you how I went from planning the most romantic moment of my life to something much, much darker. I had this brilliant idea. I was going to propose to Sophie in her native language, French. She moved to the US when she was 14, and even though her English was perfect, I knew how much she loved speaking French with her family. So, I figured what could be more romantic than getting down on one knee and asking her to marry me in the language of love. I didn't tell her I was learning. I wanted it to be a complete surprise. So, every morning before work, I listened to French podcasts. On my lunch breaks, I practiced verb conjugations instead of scrolling through social media. I even got one of those apps that sends you daily vocabulary words. First, I was just picking up the basics. Hello. How are you? Where's the bathroom? Survival stuff. But after a few months, something weird started happening. I started understanding things. Not just textbook phrases, but real conversations. Sophie would chat with her friends on the phone, assuming I had no idea what they were saying. I never thought much of it before. She'd be laughing, throwing in a mon Dieu here and there, and I'd just nod along, pretending to be clueless. But then, one evening, I caught something. We were sitting on the couch. She was scrolling through Instagram, chatting with her best friend, Camille, on speakerphone. I wasn't paying attention until I heard Camille say something that made Sophie burst out laughing. Oh my God! Does he still smell like that? I didn't react. I kept my face blank. But inside, I felt like I had just been smacked in the face with a baguette. Because, you see, a few months earlier, Sophie had casually mentioned that my aftershave was a bit strong. No big deal. I switched brands. Problem solved. Or so I thought. But now, here she was laughing about it behind my back. In another language because she assumed I couldn't understand. It stung. Not because of what she said, but because of how she said it. The way she cackled like it was the funniest thing in the world. The way Camille joined in, making some joke I didn't fully catch. I let it slide. Relationships aren't perfect. People vent. But that night, as I lay in bed next to her, something gnawed at me. If she was saying little things like that, what else was she saying? And let me tell you, this was only the beginning. So, here's the thing about learning a language in secret. It turns your entire world into a game of espionage. Suddenly, every conversation feels like a puzzle. Every word, every phrase, every little smirk, they all mean something. And the more I understood, the more I realized. Sophie talked about me a lot. Most of it was harmless. Complaints about my driving. Jokes about how I always left the fridge open. Normal couple stuff. But then, one night, I heard something that made me pause mid-sip of my beer.
Le concombre n'a aucune idée.
Now, for those of you who didn't spend months secretly learning French, let me translate. The cucumber has no idea. Excuse me? First, I thought I misheard. Maybe she was talking about an actual cucumber. Maybe this was some French expression I hadn't learned yet. But then Camille, her best friend and apparently my official roast master, giggled. Oh my God! You still call him that? Sophie snorted. It's just easier. This way, he never suspects anything. I went completely still. Because let's get one thing straight. I have never, in my life, been called cucumber. Not in school, not in sports, not even as some weird inside joke. There was only one reason to give someone a nickname like that, so you could talk about them in secret. And whatever they were saying was something they didn't want me to know. My first instinct was to confront her, to spin around, beer in hand, and say, "Oh really? What exactly does the cucumber not suspect?" But I didn't, because suddenly, this wasn't just about overhearing a stupid nickname. This was about why she needed a code name for me in the first place. So I did what any rational man would do. I played dumb. I pretended I was lost in my phone, scrolling through sports stats, while in reality, I was listening very carefully. And let me tell you what I heard next. It made me wish I had never started learning French. You ever have one of those moments where time slows down? Like in the movies, when the main character hears something so shocking that the background fades, the sound distorts, and all they can do is stare blankly into the void? Yeah. That was me. And then I heard it. Sophie sighed dramatically. Do you think I really need a little break? I froze. A break? From what? Work? Social media? Me? Camille made a noise. Well, he is charming. But you've already had a taste of something else. I felt my stomach drop. Something else. Not someone else. Something else. Like an experience. Like a comparison. Sophie hummed. Thoughtful. And then, she said something that made my heart pound in my chest. He's definitely bigger. I didn't react. I couldn't react. I just sat there, staring at my screen, while the world around me blurred. At first, my brain did that thing where it tries to protect you. Maybe they're talking about something else? Maybe bigger meant like height? Or personality? Or, God, I don't know, bank account size? But then Camille howled with laughter. That kind of laughter where you slap your knee and lean forward like you just heard the funniest joke of your life. And Sophie? She just snorted. Please. The cucumber never suspects a thing. There it was again. The cucumber. I should have been angry, furious even. But in that moment, I felt something else. Something unexpected.
Absolute. Pure. Bewildered fascination.
Because how, in the actual world, did I, James, a fully grown man, become the cucumber? Was this a secret code name? Some weird inside joke? Had I missed some major, life-altering event where I unknowingly held a cucumber in an embarrassing way? I didn't know what was worse. The fact that they were clearly making fun of me, or the fact that I was too invested in finding out why they chose that name to be properly mad yet. But here's the thing. Beneath all the confusion and mild ego bruising, there was something much bigger happening. Sophie had just confirmed she was cheating. And she wasn't just cheating. She was comparing. Hunking. Like I was some contestant on a game show where the grand prize was a complete lack of dignity. So right then and there I had two choices. Option 1. I could stand up, slam my beer on the table, and say something dramatic like, "Excuse me? Would the cucumber like to be enlightened?" Or, Option 2. I could do the single hardest thing I have ever done in my life. Nothing. Stay silent. Keep listening. Gather information. Let Sophie believe I was just some clueless vegetable sitting on the couch, scrolling through my phone. Because if there's one thing I learned from years of watching crime documentaries, it's this. You don't confront the suspect until you have all the evidence. And trust me, I was about to collect a lot of evidence. Alright, so now I knew Sophie was cheating. Step 1 of my brilliant life plan? Secretly learn French to propose. Step 2? Accidentally unlock cheating DLC instead. Awesome. Just fantastic. But here's the thing, you don't just find out you're being betrayed and do nothing.
No.
You need details. Names. Dates. Locations. And most importantly, who was he? Because right now, he was just some faceless, nameless, larger-than-me mystery man floating around in my imagination. And let me tell you, the human brain, oh, it does not hold back. At first, I imagined some muscle-bound gym trainer who exclusively ate raw eggs and bench-pressed small vehicles for fun. Then I thought maybe it's a coworker? Some well-dressed, smooth-talking finance guy who calls people buddy and has a really firm handshake. Or worse, what if it was someone I knew? And that thought, that was the one that made my blood boil. So I started paying attention. Little things. Patterns. Like the way her phone was always face down when we watched TV. Or how she suddenly started staying late at work when she never used to. Or how she smiled just a little when she got certain texts. That one hit me the hardest. Because that smile, that tiny, almost imperceptible upturn of her lips, that used to be my smile. The one she'd give me when I sent her something stupid but sweet. And now it belonged to someone else. I needed proof. And it didn't take long to find it. Because one night, while Sophie was in the shower, Her phone lit up on the counter. A notification. Just one. From a contact named Mark. And all it said? A single flame emoji. Oh, okay. That's how we're playing this game. Now, I don't know about you, but where I come from, people don't send fire emojis at midnight unless something is very flammable. And I was starting to think the only thing about to be on fire was Sophie's entire life. Alright, so now I had a name. Mark. The mystery man was no longer just a faceless figure lurking in my mind. He was real. A living, breathing person who felt comfortable enough to text my girlfriend at midnight with a single flame. Now, I don't know about you, but there aren't many innocent reasons for sending a fire symbol in the dead of night. Either he was letting her know the house was burning down or, far more likely, he was flirting. I needed to know who he was. So, I did what any man with a gut feeling and an internet connection would do. I went digging. I started with Instagram, but I didn't type his name into the search bar like some kind of desperate ex. I had more self-respect than that. Instead, I went through Sophie's following list. People underestimate how revealing that is. It's like a digital map of who matters to someone. And sure enough, 10 names down, there he was.
Markel.
His profile picture? Exactly what I expected. One of those shirtless gym selfies where the guy flexes in front of a mirror, holding his phone at a weird downward angle like he's too cool to look at the camera. I clicked on his profile. Private, of course. But that didn't stop me from seeing his likes and comments. See, here's something people forget. Even if your profile is private, your activity isn't. So, I scrolled through Sophie's old photos, looking for anything he had interacted with. And then, I found it. A picture from a few months ago. Nothing too revealing. Just Sophie sitting at a small outdoor cafe, sipping a cocktail. The caption was something vague, like, "Take me back." And right underneath, among the usual comments from her friends, was Mark. "Best weekend ever." I felt my pulse in my ears. But that wasn't the worst part. It was Sophie's reply. Not just a simple like. Not even a playful response. She had written, "Agreed." That was it. Just one little word. But it hit me like a truck. Because I knew exactly where I was that weekend. At home. Alone. And Sophie? She told me she was on a work trip. I leaned back, exhaling slowly. My hands gripping my phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. Now, it wasn't just a suspicion. It wasn't just a feeling. It was real. Sophie lied about where she was. And Mark was there. Which meant I had one very important question left. How deep did this rabbit hole go? Alright, so now I knew two things for sure. First, Mark was real. Not some passing fling or a harmless friend. A real person who had been somewhere with Sophie while she was supposedly on a work trip. Second thing is, Sophie had lied to my face. No mix-up.
No misunderstanding.
She deliberately told me one thing and did another. And that was all the fuel I needed. Because here's the thing. I wasn't about to storm into the living room and start yelling. No, that would be too easy. Too emotional. And let's be honest, cheaters? They thrive on flipping things around, gaslighting you until you start questioning your own sanity. I wasn't going to give Sophie that chance.
No.
I was going to build my case. So I started watching. And you know what happens when you really start paying attention to someone? You see everything. Little things. Like how Sophie's phone was always face down now, even when she wasn't using it. Or how she would suddenly take longer showers. Like she needed an extra 10 minutes to reply to certain messages in private. Or how she had started wearing perfume to run errands. Perfume. For errands. Oh, and then there was the outfit change. Now listen. I'm not some caveman who expects his girlfriend to dress a certain way. But Sophie had always been a jeans and sweater kind of woman. Simple. Casual. Comfortable. But now she had lingerie. And not the kind you buy on a whim. The kind that comes in matching sets. Men, let me tell you something. When a woman suddenly starts investing in matching sets of lace and satin, and you haven't even seen them on her yet, she's not buying them for you. But here's where it gets really good. One night, Sophie was out meeting Camille for drinks. Sure. So I did what any curious man would do. I checked her purse. Not to steal anything. Not to take anything. Just to see. And inside, tucked between her wallet and a pack of gum, was a folded-up receipt. From a hotel. A 5-star hotel. Paid for by Mark. I felt my stomach twist. Because at that moment I knew two things. This wasn't just texting. This wasn't just flirting. This was real. And Sophie had no idea. That I knew. And trust me, folks, that was about to become my greatest advantage. There are moments in life that hit you so hard, you can actually feel your worldview shift. Holding that hotel receipt was one of them. I stared at it, my thumb running over the printed ink like I needed physical proof that this was really happening. But there it was in crisp black and white. Mark's full name. A 5-star hotel. Paid in full. 2 guests. 2. I let out a slow breath, forcing myself to stay calm. Because right then, my body wanted to do one of 3 things. First, slam my fist through a wall. Second, track down Mark and introduce his face to my car's front bumper. Third, walk into Sophie's night out, slap the receipt on the table, and watch her scramble for excuses. But no, that would be too easy. Because see, Sophie didn't just cheat. She lied. Deliberately. Coldly. Smiling in my face while sneaking around behind my back. And that deserved consequences. I took a picture of the receipt because let's be honest, evidence disappears when cheaters get nervous, and carefully put it back exactly how I found it.
No wrinkles. No creases.
Sophie was careless, but I wouldn't be. I wasn't just going to catch her. I was going to destroy her. But first, I needed more. More than just a receipt. More than vague hints in phone calls. I needed something undeniable. And lucky for me, Sophie was about to hand it to me on a silver platter. Now that I had physical proof, I could have ended it right then and there. Confronted her. Thrown the receipt on the table. Watched her stammer out a half-baked excuse. But here's the thing, I didn't want an excuse. I wanted justice. And as fate would have it, Sophie was about to make things way too easy for me. One evening, as we were finishing dinner, she let out a dramatic sigh and said, "Ugh, I have to go on another stupid business trip next weekend." I set down my fork. Oh, a business trip? Now, you'd think she would have been more careful, considering her last business trip involved Mark and a 5-star hotel. But no, she sat there, twirling her pasta like she wasn't actively digging her own grave. I played along, kept my expression neutral. "That sucks. Where to?" She waved a hand. "Same place as last time." I nearly laughed. She had no idea that I knew exactly what last time meant. So I nodded sympathetically. "Need a ride to the airport?" She shook her head quickly. "No, no. Camille's actually dropping me off." Ah, Camille. The world's most loyal accomplice. A woman who, as far as I knew, had never even told the truth about what she had for breakfast, let alone a cheating scandal. I smiled. "Gotcha. Well, have fun." Sophie relaxed, probably relieved that I wasn't suspicious. Which was funny because at that very moment, I had never been more sure of anything in my life. But here's where things got really good. I wasn't going to let her just waltz off to her little weekend getaway. No, I had a plan. And trust me when I say, this was about to be the biggest mistake of her life. Sophie thought she was untouchable. That she could lie to my face, sneak off with Mark, and I'd just sit at home like a clueless little cucumber. Yeah. No. If she was taking a business trip, I was about to turn it into a business lesson. I started with the basics, tracking her flight. Now, I wasn't about to go full FBI agent, but let's just say airline websites make it really easy to check flight schedules. And guess what? There was no flight. Not under her name. Not under her company's name. Nothing. Shocking. So I took it a step further. The next morning, while Sophie was in the shower, I casually grabbed my phone and called her office. Just a friendly, "Hey, Sophie left her charger at home. What hotel is she staying at so I can overnight it to her?" The receptionist? Confused. The response? "Sophie doesn't have any travel scheduled." I actually had to mute the phone to keep from laughing. See, here's the thing. Sophie had no idea I was playing detective. She thought I was still the sweet, unsuspecting boyfriend who trusted her every word. And that made her careless. So I let her go through the whole routine.
Pecking her back.
Kissing me goodbye. Saying, "I'll call you before bed." I smiled, waved her off. Even threw in a cheerful, "Have a great trip, babe." And then, I followed her. Not in some dramatic, movie-style car chase. I wasn't lurking in shadows or wearing a trench coat. No, I kept it simple. Waited 10 minutes. Grabbed my keys. Drove a few streets behind her, blending into traffic. And where did Sophie, my hardworking, dedicated, business-traveling girlfriend end up? A luxury hotel downtown. Not the airport. Not a work conference. Just a very expensive room. And guess who was already there, standing in the lobby, wearing a button-down way too tight for a man in his 30s? Mark. I watched from across the street as Sophie practically skipped into his arms, smiling, kissing him like they were some kind of forbidden love story, like she hadn't just left the actual man paying her bills sitting at home. And let me tell you, at that moment, standing there watching everything unfold, I wasn't heartbroken. I was thrilled, because now I had everything I needed. And Sophie? She had no idea what was coming. Now that I had undeniable proof, I could have blown everything up right then and there. Marched across the street, stormed into that fancy hotel lobby, and made a scene that would have been talked about for years. But that would have been too easy. See, Sophie thought she was running the show. She thought she had control, that she could juggle me and Mark without either of us knowing. So, I decided to do something a little more fun. I went home, poured myself a drink, and started planning the perfect setup. Step 1. I texted Sophie. "Hey babe, thinking of planning something special for our anniversary next week. Got a surprise for you. Make sure you keep that night free." The bait was set. She responded almost immediately. "Ah, you're so sweet. Can't wait, red heart." "Oh, you won't have to wait long, sweetheart." Step 2. I made a reservation. Not just any reservation, the most expensive restaurant in town. The kind of place where you need to book months in advance. Luckily for me, money talks, and after a quick call, I had a table secured. Step 3. I invited a special guest. Not Mark.
No.
That would have been too predictable. I invited Sophie's boss. Because, the same boss she told me she had a work trip with. The one who, up until that moment, had no idea she'd used his name as an alibi for a weekend getaway. Now, here's the best part. Sophie had no idea what was coming. She thought we were going out for a romantic anniversary dinner. She got dressed up, curled her hair, wore that little black dress she knew I liked. She looked like the perfect girlfriend. Too bad the act was about to fall apart. Because when we arrived at the restaurant, she was all smiles. Until she saw who was sitting at our table. And let me tell you, her face? Priceless. But oh, trust me, the best part was still coming. Now let me paint this scene for you. Sophie and I walk into this ridiculously fancy restaurant. Dim lighting, chandeliers, waiters in tuxedos. She's beaming, holding my arm like we're the picture-perfect couple. And then, she sees him, her boss, sitting at our table, holding a glass of wine, looking very, very confused. Sophie freezes. Her grip on my arm tightens for just a second before she lets go. Her smile flickers, just slightly, before she plasters it back on. "Wah, what's going on?" She laughs, but it's too high-pitched, too forced. I pull out her chair like the gentleman I am. "Take a seat, babe. I invited a guest." She slowly sits down, her eyes darting between me and her boss. I can see the gears turning in her head, spinning so fast they might catch fire. Her boss, still confused, sets down his glass. I have to admit, I was surprised when I got James's call. He said he wanted to thank me for the business trip you both went on. Silence. Dead. Silence. Sophie goes pale. Like ghost white, lips parted, brain buffering at 2% kind of pale. She blinks at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. I sip my wine, lean back, and let it sink in. Because here's the beauty of it. She can't lie. Not to me. Not to her boss, who is now sitting there, waiting for an explanation about a trip that never existed. And oh, Sophie tries. She really tries. Oh, that. I think there was a mix-up. James must have misunderstood. I tilt my head, feigning concern. Misunderstood? But babe, you said you had meetings all weekend. You were so busy. Remember? She swallows hard, nods, forces out a strained smile. Her boss? Not smiling. Sophie, he says slowly, you didn't travel with me. In fact, I don't think you've been out of the office in months. More silence. I watch her crumble. Her hands shake. Her face flushes red. I sit back, enjoying the show. Because this is it. The moment she realizes, she is completely screwed. If I had to describe Sophie's face in that moment, I'd say it was the exact expression of someone realizing they just stepped on a landmine. Her boss sat there, waiting for an explanation that did not exist. I sat there, swirling my wine, watching her life fall apart in real time. And Sophie? She did what every caught liar does. She panicked. Oh wait, I must have mixed up the dates. Haha. You know how I am. She let out this weird, high-pitched laugh like some malfunctioning robot trying to sound human. Her boss did not laugh. He leaned forward, frowning. Mixed up the dates? Sophie, you told the entire office you were away for work. That you'd be unavailable all weekend. If you weren't with me, where exactly were you? The entire restaurant felt like it went quiet. Sophie's hands trembled as she reached for her water glass. Her eyes darted toward me, searching for help. Help from the man she had been cheating on. I raised an eyebrow. Yeah, babe. Where were you? Checkmate. And this is where the meltdown began. She snapped. First came the denial. This is ridiculous. You're both ganging up on me. Then the anger. James, I don't know what kind of twisted game you're playing, but this is low. I just leaned back, completely calm. I'm not playing a game, Sophie. I'm just asking a simple question. Where were you? The entire table was silent. The tables next to us were silent. The waiters, pretending not to eavesdrop while standing way too close. Sophie was trapped. And then, the moment of desperation. She suddenly stood up, chair scraping against the floor. Too loud. People stared. You know what? I don't have to deal with this. You're pathetic, James. I smirked. Because this was her last move. The classic, if I cause a scene, maybe I can escape this situation strategy. But oh, Sophie, you're not escaping anything. Because the best part of this night, it hadn't even happened yet. Now, here's where things got beautiful. Sophie was fuming, hands shaking, face flushed, breathing uneven. She had one move left, leaving before things got worse. Except, things were already worse. She turned to storm out, but before she could take a step, I calmly pulled something out of my pocket. A small, folded piece of paper. Before you go, babe, maybe take a look at this. I slid it across the table. Sophie hesitated, then snatched it up like it might bite her. She unfolded it, eyes scanning the page. And then, she stopped breathing, because in her hands, the hotel receipt, the 5-star hotel, Mark's name, her business trip, everything. She stared at it, completely silent. Her boss, leaning forward, now very interested. The surrounding tables, not even pretending not to listen. I crossed my arms, giving her a sweet, patient smile. Still think I'm playing a twisted game? Her lips parted. No words came out. Then, her face crumbled. Tears. Not the kind you cry when you're sad. The kind you cry when you know you've lost. She turned to me, voice shaking. James, I can explain. I stood up, smoothed out my shirt. And then, I delivered the final blow. By the way, I learned French. And with that, I picked up my coat and walked out, leaving Sophie in the middle of an expensive restaurant, holding undeniable proof of her own betrayal, surrounded by an audience that would be telling this story for years. But oh, my friends, this isn't where the story ends. You ever hear that phrase, play stupid games, win stupid prizes? Well, Sophie was about to receive the grand prize. See, walking out of that restaurant wasn't just satisfying, it was strategic. Because while Sophie was busy having a public meltdown, I had already taken the next step. That night, instead of going home, I went to a lawyer. Now, Sophie and I weren't married yet. No shared bank accounts. No joint assets. But we did have a lease together. And guess whose name was on it?
Mine.
Guess whose name wasn't? Hers. Oh, and you know what else? That fancy apartment she loved so much? I paid 80% of the rent. Which meant Sophie wasn't just about to lose me. She was about to lose her home. So, the next morning, while Sophie was still recovering from her humiliation, I did what any responsible man would do. I called our landlord, told him my girlfriend had been cheating, and I wanted her off the lease immediately. Now, legally, in our state, if only one person's name is on the lease, the other person has no rights to stay there. And since I was the sole leaseholder, Sophie had exactly 1 week to get her stuff and get out. And trust me, that conversation was going to be amazing. I got home that evening, and sure enough, there was Sophie, sitting on the couch. Her eyes were red, her mascara smudged. She had the look, that classic, I'm about to beg for forgiveness look. I shut the door behind me, calm, collected. She sniffled. James, I know I messed up, but please, can we talk? I sat down across from her, took a deep breath, and then I slid another piece of paper across the table. Not a hotel receipt, an official lease removal notice. She blinked, picked it up, read it, and then the realization hit. Wait, what is this? Her voice cracked. I leaned back, giving her that same patient smile I had in the restaurant. It means you have a week to pack your things. She froze. You're kicking me out? I tilted my head. Well, technically, you were never on the lease. So, legally speaking, you were never really in. And just like that, she broke. Tears. Begging. The whole, I made a mistake. I don't even like Mark. It was just a stupid thing, we can fix this speech. But me, I just watched. Unmoved. Because Sophie didn't cry when she cheated. She didn't cry when she was laughing about me behind my back. She only cried when she got caught. And me? I was done. So I stood up, stretched, walked to the door. And just before I left, I turned back, gave her one last look, and said, by the way, Mark's wife says hi. Then I walked out, leaving Sophie sitting there, stunned, as she realized I had burned her entire life to the ground. And let me tell you, folks, revenge has never tasted better.